You've heard of it, right? Four horsemen, a seven-headed beast, the number 666. The Book of Revelation is without a doubt one of the most iconic, influential, and, let's be honest, confusing books ever written. For 2,000 years, people have used it to predict the end of the world. But what if, just what if, we've been reading it all wrong? Okay, let's get right into it. This whole massive debate really boils down to one fundamental question. Is the Book of Revelation a blueprint for our future, a play-by-play of events that are still to come? Or is it more like a symbolic history of the past, a story about things that have, for the most part, already happened? You know, for as long as this book has been around, people have tried to use it like some kind of cosmic calendar, desperately trying to match its strange prophecies with current events and world leaders, absolutely convinced that they were the final generation. And believe me, this is nothing new. And let's be real, the track record isn't exactly stellar. From the Millerites back in 1844, who literally sold all their stuff expecting the world to end, to much more recent predictions in 1988 and 2011, history is just littered with these well-meaning but totally wrong attempts. All these failed predictions kind of force us to step back and ask a much deeper question. So here's the crucial point. What if the key to understanding Revelation isn't in tomorrow's headlines, but in yesterday's history books? What if the secret to unlocking the whole thing depends on two simple things: when it was written and who it was originally written for? So let's start with the view you're probably most familiar with. I mean, it's everywhere, in blockbuster movies, in best-selling novels. It's called the futurist lens. In a nutshell, futurism reads Revelation as tomorrow's newspaper delivered 2,000 years early. It sees all the visions of judgment, war, and tribulation as a detailed script for the final act of human history, an act that hasn't even begun yet. Now, what makes this view so popular is that it has this really clear step-by-step timeline. First, there's a secret rapture where Christians just vanish from the earth. That event kicks off a 7-year period of intense suffering called the tribulation. After that, Christ returns publicly to defeat his enemies, and then finally he sets up a 1,000-year kingdom on earth. It's a very neat linear sequence, and you can totally see the appeal, right? The framework is straightforward. It feels very cinematic. It offers a big cosmic reason for the very real evil we see in the world. It creates this powerful sense of urgency, and it gives people a way to connect current events, especially in the Middle East, directly to what they see as biblical prophecy. But that's not the only way to read the book. There's another much older interpretation that's been making a huge comeback. It's called the preterist lens, which comes from a Latin word that just means past. The preterist view basically flips the script. It says Revelation isn't mainly about our future, but about the original audience's immediate future. It claims that all those dramatic prophecies about judgment were largely fulfilled in the 1st century. Specifically, the war between Rome and the Jews that ended with the complete destruction of Jerusalem and its temple in the year 70. And here's the absolute linchpin of the whole argument. For this view to work, Revelation had to have been written before AD 70, not in the 90s like many people assume, because if it was written in the 60s, then suddenly it's not a prediction about a distant future, it's an urgent flashing red light warning to those early churches about the historical hurricane that was right on their doorstep. Now, scholars who hold this view point to 3 major lines of evidence from inside the book itself. First, there's an architectural clue. John is told to measure the temple. Kind of hard to measure something that's already a pile of rubble, right? That suggests it was still standing. Then, a sociological clue. The book talks a lot about the intense conflict between the early church and the Jewish authorities, which was a huge deal before AD 70. And finally, a political clue. A vision of 7 kings lines up perfectly with the succession of Roman emperors if the book was written when Nero, the 6th emperor, was still in power. So if that early date is correct, it's a total game changer. It completely reframes how we read all the wild imagery. The symbols stop being about some future global dictator and suddenly start pointing to people and powers that were terrifyingly real for the first century church. Let's just take the most infamous number of all, 666. Through the futurist lens, it's a code for a future world leader, but through the preterist lens, it's a first-century puzzle. Using a common Jewish practice called gematria, where letters also have numerical values, the name Nero Caesar, when you spell it in Hebrew, well, it adds up to exactly 666. The same kind of shift happens with the mark of the beast. Futurists often imagine a literal piece of tech like a microchip or a digital tattoo, but preterists argue it was a powerful symbol of allegiance. See, in the Roman Empire, to do business, you had to participate in the imperial cult, basically worship Caesar. So the mark on your hand or forehead symbolized that your actions, your hand, and your beliefs, your forehead, were loyal to Rome, not Christ. Refusing that had very real economic consequences. And this reinterpretation just keeps going for all the major symbols. Armageddon, that becomes symbolic language for the absolutely devastating war between Rome and Judea. The great enemy, Babylon, not some revived future empire, but a code name for first-century Jerusalem, which had allied itself with Rome, the beast, to persecute Christians. And that great terrible judgment described in the book, that was the horrifying destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. So we have two completely different ways of reading the exact same book. And what's really fascinating is how these different interpretations create two profoundly different ways of seeing the world and our place in it. Think of it this way. The futurist view tends to see history as a story of inevitable decline. The world is getting worse and worse, it's all destined to collapse, and the church's job is just to hang on until the escape. The preterist view, on the other hand, often creates a more optimistic outlook. It sees Christ's kingdom as advancing now, slowly but surely, like leaven gradually transforming cultures from the inside out. You could really call it a tale of two hopes. One perspective sees a world spiraling down toward one final inevitable crisis. The other sees a world that, despite all its very real problems, is being gradually transformed by a victorious king. And this has huge practical implications. One view encourages you to scan the headlines, always looking for signs of the end. The other encourages you to build for the long haul, to create families, churches, schools, and cultures that are meant to last for generations, faithfully working to make the world a better place. So at the end of the day, this isn't just about getting a chart right or winning a theological debate. It's about how our vision of the future fundamentally shapes our actions in the present. The ultimate question Revelation leaves us with is this: how does what we believe about the very end shape how we live right now?